nothing happens by accident.
Yeah.
You know, relationships don't just break down one day because they do. There's a lead up to that. What part did I play in that? What could I have done better? What can I learn to move forward to take into the next relationship?
I got tired of walking around with a mask on, smiling but my heart singing sad songs. Yeah, I was living for myself. I was dead wrong till I got the call, no cell phone. Man, you talking to the real me.
Right, bro. So welcome Uncompromised Podcast. This is technically episode 1. Now, the purpose of this podcast, since I've rebranded, is to really just get guys on who have not necessarily been like rags to riches in terms of financial wins, but have gone from perhaps one background to success in or relative success in their eyes, and really to just talk about topics that are thought-provoking for guys, because, you know, as we talked a bit about on your podcast, like I think there's a lot of topics that guys just don't talk about, and have that space for them to really have that thought-provoking conversation around various topics. So in terms of obviously fitting in with the theme of the brand of the podcast and being uncompromised, what, as a man, what does living uncompromised mean to you?
That's a big question. I think it means a lot of different things, but if I had to break it down and summarize it, I would say firstly, it's uncompromised in having full belief and almost full throttle to what you actually want, and ignoring all the noise, the negativity, the obstacles, the what if this happens, ignoring all of that and having absolute focus and tunnel vision of how you get from A to B. And I think that looks like having your non-negotiables of things that you do every single day without fail, that's going to help you get from A to B when life happens. On the other side of that, I think in terms of looking out and zooming out a little bit for complete happiness and complete success. So what I mean by complete is not just career, but when we start to look at relationships and our own personal goals and our health, almost then having compromise and having to compromise and knowing how to compromise in those situations. And what I mean from that is, even from a career standpoint, compromising means that I know I can't go 100% all the time because I'm going to burn out.
In terms of like energy and...
Exactly. Yeah. And it means if I am going to be with someone, that I have to make compromises in giving them my full attention at certain times, and I can't work all the time. It means I'm going to have to compromise maybe on some training days and things like that. So I think on one side of it, you're full throttle, you're 100 miles an hour, you got full belief in it. And then you sprinkle in a little bit of compromise where you value it to be.
No, definitely, bro. Yeah, I think for me, what you said about like the energy management side of stuff, just in terms of like training, the training aspect and like not burning out. And we'll get onto some questions around high performance in a minute. But for those of you that don't know Reiss is an S&C coach for fighters, specifically now since you've just niched down in coaching. Been a coach for a long time, but has now also launched, plug your new thing here for you, the Be Elite program with regards to working with high performers, business owners, CEOs, or just high performers in general, people who are wanting to achieve high performance. So with regards to what you've said about your values, what you believe living uncompromised truly is to you, what part of your life were you not living in alignment with those values? Or is there a part of your life where you weren't living to that?
At any one time, I was probably
like literally from childhood to now, because in terms of like opportunity to look at your story and think about things in a different light.
I would say minus the last 2 years, in fact, even less, minus the last 18 months, I was probably at any given time only nailing one area, I would say. I think at any given time, I was sacrificing my health. I think I was sacrificing my relationships at another time with partners, with family, with friends. And I think at any one time, I was sacrificing my own personal goals. So in our Be Elite program, we have those 4 areas, and it's similar to what you mentioned in your Uncompromised program. We have our health, our relationships, our personal goals that we want to achieve, and our careers as well. And I found a pattern, and one of the main reasons I launched the program was because as one went up and I was happy to where it was, everything else dropped.
Yeah.
And I think it's now only in the last 18 months that I'm balanced across the board, and I'm happy at where I am in each one of those. And I think the key thing now that is using, and what I have done is used health as the foundation to all of that underpins everything. We mentioned energy levels already, but if I really look after my health, everything else falls into place, because energy's up, I'm confident, I've got time, I'm just mentally good, I'm physically good, I'm healthier, happier. And so when I break that down, and we do this in the program, we use health as the catalyst. Now, the program I mentioned is for business people, but essentially business is their sport.
Yeah.
They have to perform.
Yeah.
So we look at...
I like how you've like put it as like a connection to what you do with the fighters, but with them. That's
because cool. I notice fighters have success not just in the ring, but throughout the whole of their life. And I think it's to do with the training and the health side of things. So what we do is, and we've linked with experts in each of these areas, is we have our training, which I oversee. We have sleep, we have our mindset, and we have our nutrition. And by nailing all of those 4 areas, and which underpins health, I've just seen everything improve without even really trying to. Yeah,
because you've literally answered the question I was thinking of next, was like specifically what was the catalyst that allowed you to then, because it's essentially, it's almost like the seesaw analogy, but a 3-way seesaw. If you could have that like one on each side, if you go down on one, the other 2 take a hit, and like what specifically was the catalyst to help you find that balance?
Honestly, it was a cliche answer. I think everyone says this now: COVID, and lockdown.
Yeah.
So
time to focus on yourself.
Just that first 2 weeks of COVID, whenever it happened, I think it was like the 19th of March or something, was the craziest 2 weeks. And actually looking back in hindsight was where I realized actually how mentally strong I am. Because in that 2 week period, I went from, well, the gym's closed, so all my income was gone. I used up the last of my savings to pay rent. I broke up with my girlfriend at that time, who had been with for 6 years, and then had to move out the house that I just worked 3 years to move into, and I'd been in there a month.
So it was like a big fuck this moment, like
it was
getting your world flipped upside down.
It was just thing. Yeah, it was a real, and I remember feeling it at the time. I remember sitting back one day and thinking, right, this is either a catalyst moment, or it's this is not going to work out kind of moment. And fortunately, it went the opposite way. But that was the catalyst that made me go, wow, I've now got to step back for a second and look at, why did my relationship break down? What am I going to do from a business standpoint? How do I make money? I claim I'm an entrepreneur, but let's prove it now, because gyms are closed. How am I going to survive this? And from a health standpoint, it was like, right, I haven't actually been taking my training seriously. I've been eating a lot of junk. I've been binging on weekends, going out, getting drunk. Probably at that point for like 9 months solid, I was out every weekend drinking. And so that was a real kind of reset and what I did, actually, I used it as a holiday the first 3 months of lockdown, to be honest. Had a great time where I just thought, you know what, forget all of this. I'm just going to focus on myself and training. And that was the only thing. Myself and my health, my training, my food, and my sleep.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. I think like a lot of people tried to do the same, but fell short because, and this leads into kind of something I wanted to ask you about, is like, in terms of the Uncompromised program, we run off a coaching model, which is the Uncompromised pyramid. So just like you have health as the foundation, we have an uncompromised identity, because you ask any high performer, any guy, they can tell you what peak performance looks like to them. But they always focus on that, and that's the peak of the pyramid, right? But you cannot get there unless you reverse engineer the process. And for me, that's about looking at guys on an identity level, doing the work, raising their self-awareness, because once you have that self-awareness on an identity level, you know what your coping mechanisms are, you understand what your self-destructive habits are. So if you have that self-awareness on an identity level, you can start living more purposefully. You can change your environment. When you live more purposefully, you build confidence and momentum. And when you build momentum, that's when you have the capacity to start performing at peak performance. So for you, what would you say the self-destructive habits were that you were experiencing? Like, I know you touched on like alcohol and food, but in terms of like, sometimes self-destructive habits can be almost like a thought process as well. And I think with your background in sports performance, working with combat athletes who have such high mental capacity and such a strong mindset, what was the transition between going from, say, where you were, do you think, and getting to like where you are now in terms of the mindset?
It was a switch in blaming external things,
That victim mentality, like.
to blaming myself, or not blame myself, but looking in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And as opposed to being like, the world's against me, this person's done that to me, this has happened to me, it's not my fault, let me go out, it's been a terrible week, let me go out, get drunk, and it's all okay, and we go again Monday. It was, no, actually, there's nothing happens by accident.
Yeah.
You know, relationships don't just break down one day, because they do. There's a lead up to that. What part did I play in that? What could I have done better? What can I learn to move forward to take into the next relationship? Because if I don't learn anything from it, it happens again, which usually happens with a lot of guys that I work with. They do hit the drink, and then they kind of have a little bit of a health kick, go into another relationship, and patterns repeat themselves. They don't stop the root cause. From a business standpoint, okay, why was I in a position where I only had a month's worth of savings? What was I not doing from a business standpoint? What can I do next time to make sure that if this ever happens again, I've got 6 months or a year's worth of money there, and it's a stress eliminated. So it was just, like you mentioned, a switch from playing the victim to actually, now I'm not the victim, I'm in sole control of my future.
Leadership mentality.
And it all starts with what I do right now. And it was just that flip where it's like, right, it's no one else's fault, it's completely my fault. Now how do we move forward and make sure that we improve and actually take the lessons from it?
So for anybody that's watching has been in that position where perhaps they're starting to, like, you know, the purpose of the podcast, thought-provoking, maybe thinking, oh, am I perhaps now playing the victim? Like, the things you've said are resonating with them. What advice would you give to someone to be able to go from where you were at to where you are now? What in terms of mindset?
I would say if someone sat there and they're saying, you know, am I playing the victim? Is it my fault? I would say 100% yes. And they might feel bad initially for the next week or the next month and think, okay, this is all my fault, what can I do? But the great thing in taking that responsibility in terms of things that already happen, it now means that anything that's about to happen is also completely in your control.
Yeah.
So although, yes, you can look back, and they will initially look back and be, I could have changed that. If only I'd done X, Y wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Eventually that's going to, you know, and there's things they can do to stop thinking about the past. But eventually that same headspace is going to allow them to take full control of everything else that happens. And now all of a sudden, like we're speaking about having that tunnel vision, it doesn't matter what obstacles come up. It doesn't matter if life throws 1, 2, 3 bad things at you, because they're all external factors. It's all about, and we spoke about non-negotiables. What are you doing today that's going to take you a step forward? And once you actually realize that you are solely responsible for everything that happens in your life, there's almost like a sense of freedom, because you've now just taken away that ceiling. Because if you're the only person holding yourself back from this untapped potential, from the finances you want, the life you want, then really there isn't anyone standing in your way, and you can have everything that people dream of. They just don't know it. They stand 100%. In their own way. I actually read a podcast. I read a podcast or listened to a podcast, and it said it's once people realize that the only person in their way is themselves, it's a game changer. And I think it's true. And I think a lot of people like to make other things up and tell themselves a certain narrative that, oh, I can't do that because I didn't have this upbringing, or, you know, only X amount of people get to that job. But that's just a comfort blanket. It's just a validation or an excuse they tell themselves so that they don't even have to try. Whereas if you get rid of that, now you have to own the fact that, yes, I'm solely responsible for getting to that end point. But if I don't get there, I'm also solely responsible. So it's that fine balancing act. And I think once you can master that 100% responsibility for the good and the bad, then you can sort of do whatever you want.
What you said about non-negotiables is interesting, because it's a term that, like, for anyone that follows more than one coach, they'll have come across the term non-negotiables, right? And for you, what are the top 3 to 5 non-negotiables that you would say lead to high performance as an individual?
So what I'd say is that these can change as well. I don't think... They're always
specific to you as an individual.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of saying... And my issue with non-negotiables and what you see on social media is that they're always a long list, and they're always just stupid things that people aren't really going to have the time to do. They're made up by people who have 3 hours to do a morning routine, and not people who have kids, got to get to the gym before an 8 o'clock start. They got other lives going on. So I feel like sometimes a bit unrealistic. And what I try and say to my clients is choose just 3 things, 3 easy things that you need to do every single day, and build these into habits over time. Do these every single day, and within about 2 months, 3 months, these are habits and these are things that they're doing without even recognizing. Once we're at that point, think of another 3. So that might start as something really simple as drinking 2 liters of water, getting into bed with 9 hours before you have to wake up, and training every day. Just something very, very simple.
Because this is something that I wanted to kind of, again, like going down the route of thought-provoking, is that you're now working with high performers, but you've worked with top athletes in the world, you know, like UFC stars, boxing, you know, world title champions. And I think like for the general guy who would be listening to this, thinks like there's a huge difference between who they are and who these people are. And when we talk about like non-negotiables, and I hammer this home with my clients all the time, and I prefer to use the term like personal standards as opposed to non-negotiables, because I feel like non-negotiables almost sounds like something you have to do.
Yeah.
Whereas personal standards, like empowering, it's like, okay, well, what do I want to be known as? But without getting kind of sidetracked, I think for you, your ability, and what I always noticed as a coach from working with you at Graft House and over the years, is your ability to simplify the basics, regardless of whether someone's a world-class athlete, regardless of someone's a Gen Pop client, because the basics work. And I think there's that distortion and confusion that to achieve high performance in whatever that means to you, that you have to have these extensive morning to-do lists or evening to-do lists, but it's about the basics. And I think that's something that like anyone who's followed you can pick up on really well, is that it doesn't have to be this huge elaborate list. It's like,
I always like to use the analogy of like towing a car from a dead stop. Car's broken down, and that first initial push, you might have 3 people trying to get it moving, but once it does get moving, it becomes easy. It's almost weightless. So what we're trying to do is make the non-negotiables, personal standards, so easy at the start that they get that car moving, and all of a sudden then a week of I've hit this 7 days this week builds momentum, that builds the dopamine hit, that builds I want to add to this. The motivation goes up, the discipline goes up. They start to get that snowball effect that they can then layer on top of, and as you said, in terms of your pyramid, they can then start
habit stacking
to try and get to the peak of the pyramid. But it all starts with, I always say to clients, what's the smallest thing, the most simplest thing you can do today to make a positive impact? The
biggest difference as well. It's like, I always say to my guys, like, look at the, as you say, in terms of root causing, like this, and self-destructive habits. What's the one thing, like forget everything else, what one thing, if you stop doing, would you see the biggest changes? Like for me, it was literally drinking at weekends. Drinking would lead to sniff. Then I'd got a hangover the next day. I'd eat shit food. Like you see that trail of thought, just like we're saying with positive habit stackings, negative habits stack on top of each other. So if there's one thing that we can now address, it's like getting to the root cause, identifying the real self-destructive habit for guys. It's like, if you can just focus on that one thing and have that self-awareness, then you can create so much change off the back of that. And I think people, particularly men, do sometimes let their ego get in the way of just being honest about what that real self-destructive or root cause habit is, because it means they're going to have some uncomfortable change. And it might mean leaving their friendship circle for a little bit. Or did you experience any of that with changing?
Yeah, so I had this thing growing up where I didn't really, not that I didn't fit in, I always had friends and stuff like that, but growing up I always never really felt 100% myself until I went to uni, and my 5 uni mates are my best friends now, and that was the first time I really felt comfortable around people. But even then, and moving forward, it's like as you develop as a person, you naturally attract things that are more intertwined with that, and as a direct result, you're going to not necessarily outgrow people, but your circle's slightly going to change, and you limit your time with certain friends. And it's a difficult process though, because the number one thing that people in that situation feel is guilt, and all of a sudden they feel guilty for improving. And so yeah, I definitely experienced that, but there was 2 things I do. One was that you should never feel guilty for looking to improve yourself, because the friends that really matter and the family that are really close to you and your partners that are the ones for you, they'll support you. So it doesn't matter what you do. They're not thinking anything. If anything, they're trying to push you further forward and further away from where they are if they're not going with you. And the second thing was just almost sitting down and just being, this group of friends, this is what the relationship is now. It's we go and watch football and we catch up once a month. And detaching yourself from that, because I've always been friends with them and we used to do things weekly, that's the way it's always going to be. Like, life changes. It's just the way it goes. So I think if you can just take it for what it is, it's nothing deeper than that. It is just that
open to the change.
Yeah, the situation has changed. Just like the same way the winter comes and goes, summer comes and goes, your career might change, your whatever might change. It's just going through it and growing is going to lead to putting yourself in those situations and through the process. And again, even from those people, the ones that are really supporting you and are your true friends aren't going to care. They're probably, if anything, when you're saying, oh, I'm going to skip this, and they'll be like, no, you go do that and then come and meet us afterwards. Or, they're going to support you and help 100%. You rather than making you feel guilty. And I think if there is anyone that's making you feel bad or guilty, then they're probably not as good a friend as you first thought.
100%. Now, I have a final question, but I don't know if I want to actually ask you it, because there's another thing that I wanted to talk about. We've obviously talked about the person. If we're looking at the 3 pillars of the program, you as a person, what you kind of went through in your upbringing, where you got to. And we've looked at the professional side of things in terms of working with world-class athletes, building the Be Elite. But we haven't really touched on the physique element of things for yourself. Now, for those of you that don't know Reiss personally, what was your past in terms of boxing? Like, you got to a pretty decent standard.
So yeah, it was kind of just unlicensed, really. More for enjoyment, but played football at a really good standard. And then obviously took up boxing once I'd finished that, on like the unlicensed show type of stuff.
So moving forward, now that you've kind of hung your boots up as a sense as being an athlete yourself, are you working towards anything in particular for your own physical performance? Because I always say to the guys, like, having something penciled in as an accountability tool is one of the most important things you can do to tick off a goal, because it just puts that pressure on. It makes you want to do something. What are you working towards? Yeah,
I think as well, anyone from a sporting background probably needs something competitive as well. So in the gym itself, I've got targets I want to hit. I've said I want to hit 100 kg bench press,
big lad,
a 200 kg trap bar. They're my 2 for this year. And I watched a program the other day, and Bear Grylls did 25 pull-ups straight through, and he was like, I do that every day.
What, wide grip?
Yeah. So I want to do that as well. So they're kind of like just small little milestones. But at the moment, there's 2 things on my training. One's enjoyment. So I have started playing football again. Still go boxing as well, once or twice a week, jiu-jitsu, just things I enjoy with no pressure on it. And then I like to test myself mentally and see, because I think I'm quite strong mentally, but I want to break myself. I find it very enjoyable to break mentally and say, I can't go anymore, and then see if I can.
Yeah.
So I want to do things like last year I got up and ran a marathon.
Did a marathon, didn't you? For your 30th?
For my 30th, so I didn't train for it. I just got up and just ran it, yeah. The bad news is my knees are still a bit dodgy from it, so you got that to look forward to. But this year I want to try and there's a 12-hour Tough Mudder, which you can then qualify for a 24-hour Tough Mudder.
That would be cool.
Maybe do something like that. Just anything that's really hard. Just want to do things that are very, very difficult for me, because even from a business standpoint, I've noticed since I've started doing things that are hard, like cold baths, and stress of life just becomes so much easier because you're used to dealing with it. So I really want to push my boundaries, and I'm 30 now, and although I don't feel old, I know in 20 years time I'm probably going to wish that I did push myself to the max and just see what I do have physically. So that's where my training's kind of aimed towards at the minute.
Mega. Okay, so in terms of final question, and I'm always going to tailor this specific to whoever I've got on the podcast. So for you, I wanted to ask, a lot of one of the main obstacles that the clientele that I work with in busy professionals, career-driven guys, is that they struggle to embrace moving into the next phase of their life. So for you, someone who has changed his kind of coaching audience a couple of times, and that's obviously maybe a difficult transition to go from, say, like Gen Pop clients to fighters and high performance. What bit of advice would you give to people who are sat on the fence about making a big change in their life like that? Maybe career?
If it doesn't work out, you can just come back to what you're doing now.
Love it.
That's it. Simple as that.
Simple.
But if you don't do it, you're always going to wonder what if.
Yeah, and that kills people who are internally driven.
It kills you way more than You know, if it
the failure would itself.
Yeah, like I've got no problems with it. I've said this when I opened the gym. I think I said it to you actually. Like, I have no qualms in the gym closing after a year, and I have to message Tony and Charlie and say, "Is there any chance can I come back?" I don't care.
Yeah.
What is anyone going to say to me? And I think it goes back to almost what we spoke about on your podcast, where we spoke about insecurities and owning them.
Yeah.
No one can tell me anything about failing as a gym owner because I don't care. I gave it a go. Luckily, it hasn't happened like that. But that's just my mentality that what's the worst that can happen? Give it a go. At least you know, and you can always go back to what you're doing now.
Perfect.